Hello, I'm Chandler Klebs, and I wanted to clarify a few things in this video and explain some things. A while back, I uploaded a video called Anti-Sexual, and I explained how I'm really more anti-sexual than asexual. And on a related note, I thought it would be good to do a video on the difference between an atheist and an anti-theist, or atheism and anti-theism, because it's similar in a way. Just as an asexual is not having sex, or at least some would define it as not interested in sex. Similarly, an atheist is like, well, they don't believe in God, and it's kind of an interesting thing because now, first I want to start out by explaining the difference between, an asexual and an anti-sexual, and then I want to apply that same standard to the atheism and anti-theism thing as well. So an asexual is just plain not interested in sex, but they have no real problem with other people doing sex. It's sort of one of those things like, well, I don't necessarily feel like dancing the Macarena, but I have no problem with other people dancing the Macarena. I actually don't know how to do it. I've tried to copy people doing it and I can't. But, Macarena aside, there's a thing that you're not interested in doing, but you don't believe that it causes harm for other people to do that. Therefore, you don't try to oppose them doing it. And so the reason I said in that video that, I'm more anti-sexual is because, well, there is harm that comes from sex. So I'm against the very idea of sex, sexually transmitted diseases and people getting pregnant with babies they don't want and then they abort them. So basically sex equates to murder in my mind. But now I want to apply the same logic to the atheist versus anti-theist thing. Because an atheist doesn't believe in a God, and of course what a God is depends on whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, Jew, or Hindu, or whatever other religion, because they have different ideas of what God is. But basically, I just sum it up that a God is always, like in monotheistic religions, which are the main thing, like the God is defined as the omnipotent, omniscient creator of the universe or whatever. And since I don't believe in a first cause, obviously that automatically makes me an atheist. Like, because of the fact that there could never be a first cause, because then, well, what created God? So that's a brief logical description of my atheism. But then, see, some atheists are like, hey, I don't believe in God, but if other people, they believe in God, that's totally cool. And I would like to be that person. I would like to be the person who just doesn't really care who believes in what God or afterlife or hell or whatever, like I would like to not care and never get into it with anybody. But there's a reason I just can't do that, because it really does cause a lot of pain and death when people are believing in a monotheistic God as well. Anyway, I don't know so much. I think it probably can cause damage with polytheism as well, I suppose. But since my experience was growing up in, monotheistic or tritheistic Christianity, because nobody can figure out the whole Trinity thing, whether God is one or three. But, well, if you believe that there's a God that created the world, well, it's interesting because then you have this dilemma where you're mad at God for creating the world the way full of suffering, and pain, and death, So that's a problem if you believe in a creator. And furthermore, if you believe that this God is all-powerful and can do anything, can do miracles like healing the sick, raising the dead, and popping things into existence out of nothing. All of those things that the biblical Christianity God can do. Well, then you think, hey, if I had that power, there's a lot of things I would fix. And then you wonder, well, why does this God not end the suffering? So that's where the omnipotence gets into it. And so then all you've got then, if you believe in an omnipotent creator, is you believe that there's this God dude out there somewhere that's a total jerk, and is really mean and created a world because he wanted people to suffer. Furthermore, if you believe that God is all-knowing, well, then you're stuck in a problem because, well, if God knows everything, including the future, because this is the crazy part, is they say that God knows the future, and from that stems the Christian belief in prophecies, particularly Bible prophecies, because God knows what will happen, exactly what will happen. That's God's foreknowledge or omniscience, which is all-knowing. And if you know everything, that includes the future as well as the past and the present, So if God knows what will happen, then that means that the future is a way it will happen that way. That means that no one, including God, can change it, see? So God doesn't have the power to change the future because he already knows what the future is. God knows what everybody's going to do. God knows what God is going to do. So as soon as you believe in omniscience, you've thrown out omnipotence. Those two attributes logically contradict, And so then you're stuck in this confusion. And the reason I say that belief in the omnipotent, omniscient creator God is terribly, it's just awful. Because it gets this cognitive dissonance in people's heads. Like, God can do anything, but he can't do anything because the future's fixed. And they're like, well, God is all-powerful. But then, they also say that they have free will and they're making choices, and that the future is fixed because of God's omnisciency, because God already knows what will happen, and yet they think, well, the future's up to me. My choices determine what happens. And there's a problem there. I mean, omnipotence and omniscience already cancel each other out because God doesn't have the power, as omnipotence would suggest, to change the future, which he knows will happen a certain way. And so that's why omniscience contradicts with omnipotence. So that's a problem. And then, of course, there's the whole free will belief, which is harmful in and of itself. Even without belief in a God, free will belief is harmful. So, that's why I'm part of the Free Will Science Religion podcast. But I want to get into the third attribute that is attributed to God often. And I don't know how people do this because they say God is all good. That God is, besides being omnipotent and omniscient, he's also all good. Well, that means that anything that God does is good. So when God drowns everybody in a global flood, as in the book of Genesis, chapter 6, well, it's good to drown people because God is all good, and God drowned people. Therefore, drowning people's good. So it's interesting. So when God kills somebody, it's good because God is all good. So whatever God does is good. So what that means is that Christianity has no such thing that is bad because everything's good because God created everything. God is all good. Therefore, everything that happens is good, including all the things that we label as bad, including sins. Sins are also good because God created them, see? And then people say, well, God is all good, but humans chose to be bad. Well, how does that work? And then you get into the whole free will thing, and then that's when the conversation usually ends, because they're saying that, well, God created everything good, but then humans are able to create something that God did not create with their choices. But remember, their choices, God already knew what their choices were going to be. Before he created the universe, God knew what you were going to do exactly, which is weird because you would think that if God was powerful, he could just change people's choices so that nobody's hurting anybody, but then, the whole omnipotence, the omniscience, they cancel each other out, and the omnibenevolence, God being all good, well, there's no way to sustain that. That's been covered so many times. That is unless, of course, you literally say that, rape, slavery, murder, torture, and people burning in hell forever is good. And it's kind of a weird thing because the whole hell thing is another main problem with Christianity. But here's the thing about it. Even if you take the afterlife out of it, the attributes of God conflict with each other. Because think about it, if God's all good, then that means God can't be bad. So God doesn't have the power. His omnipotence doesn't allow him to be bad, so it's not truly omnipotence. And it's just weird, these attributes conflict and contradict, and so it's always bad to believe in that sort of God. Yes, it's always bad, and most people are going to send me hate mail for this, but it's always bad to believe in a God that has 3 or even just 2 contradictory attributes. Even if you take out the omnibenevolence and say, well, yeah, God is good and bad. Well, here's the deal is God doesn't have a choice in how good or bad God is because God already knows everything, including what he's going to do. And so God doesn't have the power to change what he's going to do. And it's a weird, such a contradiction of the attributes of God. The logical contradictions means that anybody who uses their brain long enough will eventually turn atheist because they realize, well, this God cannot exist. So that's why I say I'm a Gnostic atheist, but more to the point, I feel like I'm more of an anti-theist. Anti-theist in the sense that people believing things that are logically impossible, trying to believe things that cannot exist, trying to believe that a God exists that cannot exist because the attributes conflict, well, that creates a cognitive dissonance within people's heads that makes them crazy. It makes them do really stupid things. And it's kind of a weird thing because there's no way, I can't believe it. No, I cannot believe it because no matter how you try to slice it, there's no way to believe in a God that's omnipotent and omniscient. Now, some people get around this and say, well, God doesn't know the future. Well, why doesn't God know the future? Because there's some things God can't know. And they say, well, we have free will. God doesn't know what we're going to choose. And I'm like, okay, so there's something that God doesn't know, therefore he doesn't know the future, yet these people will believe in Bible prophecy too, that God knows the future. And if you say that God doesn't know the future, then you've nullified all the prophecies, meaning you've nullified parts of the Bible, which mean, it's kind of a messed up thing. There's just no way the God of Christianity is defensible in any logical sort of way. It just does not work that way. So I say that belief in God is bad just as belief in free will is bad, and some people just say that, oh, well, they believe in a God that's creator, but they don't attach any attributes. So then you're left kind of with a sort of a deism thing, well, that God created the world, and that's all you've got. Now, I don't particularly have a problem with that type of belief in God, but it's a whole different God. It's not the God of monotheistic religions. It's not the God of polytheistic religions, because they do believe, that certain gods, control things or are actively doing things in the world. I guess like Zeus sends the thunderbolts or whatever, or that some deity is punishing people for their sins by sending earthquakes or something, so the idea of gods in all the major religions that I know anything about at all are always that, well, when something good happens, well, God did that, and when something bad happens, well, they either say, oh, well, God didn't do that, people did that bad thing. They chose to do it, had nothing to do with God. Or they say, well, God did do it. God did send that hurricane to kill those people, and they say that, well, that's because there were homosexuals in the area, and God had to punish them for their homosexuality, which is kind of weird because I'm not anti-homosexuality exactly. Well, sure, I'm anti-sexual, that's kind of a whole other topic. But I don't consider homosexuality to be as harmful as heterosexuality. So sure, if everybody were gay, the human race would die out, and that would solve all the problems. But that's the whole point, is that me being, since I'm anti-abortion, since killing babies is the same as killing anybody else, and I'm vegan, I don't want to buy animal products because I don't want to fund the killing and torture that always ends up in factory farms, So naturally, if I tried to believe in a God of any sort at all, that had any sort of power at all, well then I would wonder, well, why doesn't that God just turn everybody asexual or remove their sex organs? That would be one way to solve the abortion problem. Or at the very least, turn everybody vegan, so that everybody's totally herbivore, including the wolves and the lions and all that too. And if you say God can't do that, you're saying, well, God is not omnipotent. God doesn't have the power to do that. Well, then you have to define what power God does or does not have. And then what's your source for this? Because there's no evidence to suggest that there is a creator or a God intervening in this world. It's weird, and people say that there's evidence. They say, well, I know God exists because I was depressed and then God cheered me up. I'm like, like stuff like that. Or someone said, well, I know that God is real because I was a bad person. I was a jerk as an atheist, and after I turned Christian, then I became nice. So that proves that God exists. Well, I became nicer after I left Christianity. So do I take that as proof God doesn't exist? This gets really, really messed up. Because people talk about proof and evidence, and when I'm talking about evidence, I'm talking about evidence or proof. I'm talking about something that there's no way to refute it. I'm talking about something undeniable. That's the thing is, I think that it's good to realize that we could be wrong about certain things. And I know I might be wrong about certain things. I'm not saying I have all the answers or anything. I'm just literally saying that according to the attributes of the God that I was taught to believe in, I was only able to maintain that belief by not analyzing that. I didn't really know what those words meant, and I didn't realize that they logically conflicted. But, I grew up, my brain developed or something, and I now see the logical contradictions why that God cannot exist. So I understand that the God that is described in the Bible and the God that Christians describe cannot exist. And that's my position on it. And so I'm against any belief, not just God. I'm against any belief that is proven false, that it's proven either logically or by some sort of other evidence, that suggests that, let's say evidence that people find that suggests that humans evolved from other animals. And even though I don't really know how to defend that view, like Jerry Coyne or Richard Dawkins does. It totally makes sense. But in any case, another main reason, though, that I believe that belief in the monotheistic God is harmful is because the three monotheistic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, are all very pro-human and anti-other animal. So they're like, well, these other animals exist. God put them here only for us to eat. I'm like, that's weird because, first of all, it dismisses that, well, you know what, if you believe in God, then let's just say maybe God put the plants here for you to eat. Because why would God put animals for you to eat and then give them the ability to run away from you? Plants can't run away from you, but animals try to. So that tells you that even if there was a creator, that creator does not intend for you to be eating those animals. And it's weird. I mean, and so the carnivore versus the vegan and vegetarian debate is one of the major reasons why I generally am against belief in God, because people always use their belief in God and their religion as a whole to defend their carnivorous ways, and they also use their religion to defend abortion of the human babies as well. You know, they're like, well, it's God's will for these people to abort their babies because God's all powerful and He hasn't stopped it. Therefore, anything that happens is God's will. So I've read and I've heard people defend abortion, people who call themselves Christians, for the longest time, and I'm like, you know what? Religion is so bad. It's so harmful, and so I'm generally of the camp that says, yes, religion poisons everything, as, you know, Christopher Hitchens put it, you know, and I believe he called himself an anti-theist in one of the debates I listened to. And even though that term anti-theist isn't really that common, it's not in the dictionaries I know of, it's kind of a term used on the internet to describe somebody who's actually against the belief in God and would generally do things that discourage that belief. And what's interesting about this is that, you know, I'm anti-abortion, you know, I'm anti-sex in general because of all the harm it leads to, including abortion. I'm anti-meat, you know, there's things I'm against. Now, it does not follow that I actually have the power to stop people from believing in God, or that I can actually stop them from eating meat or having sex. Not really. There's not anything I can really do. So if somebody is complaining, well, don't try to take away my right to have sex and kill babies and eat meat, Chandler. It's not your right. It's my body, my choice. You know, those people exist, you know, being like, oh, I have a right to kill who I want, to have sex with whoever I want, and to believe whatever I want. Well, look, people believe what they want. It's kind of interesting that, you know, they don't choose what they want to believe. So it's not their fault that they believe in stupid things and they do terrible things. It's not their fault. But generally, if I'm ever in a situation where somebody, you know, is trying to do something harmful, there might come a time when I can prevent it. But for the most part, I realize that what people do all over the world, there's not really anything I can do about it. And it's kind of interesting because I'm not trying to actually use legal force. I'm not using violence to take away people's political freedom or anything anymore, because, you know, I've been rethinking the whole abortion issue recently, and I've just been thinking, well, you know, because there's the people like that, they see some people when they're pro-life, they just mean that they wouldn't do it and they would discourage it. You know, they would do anything they could to reduce abortion, but they wouldn't necessarily make it illegal. And then some people, when they say they're pro-life, they literally mean that they want to make it illegal. And even though I think that to be logically consistent, you either have to make abortion illegal as a form of murder, or you have to legalize all murder. So I'm kind of a little bit annoyed at the legal system, but I'm not the legal type. I mean, I don't even know if I should vote anymore. I mean, why should I vote? I mean, voting in an election in my country is sort of like walking into a church and telling them what their belief of their religion should be. They're not going to listen to me. So completely aside from whether it's the right thing to do or not, that's not the point. The point is you don't change things by trying to reason with religious people or political people. You don't change things that way. I realize that whatever change I do, any impact that I do have on other people is probably just going to be those people who know me personally. And I realize that, is that I probably, the friends that I have in my life, well, those people I'm going to be talking to. So, I mean, it's true that, I might change their mind on something, but I don't want people to do something or not do something just because Chandler Klebb said. No, that's not what I want. What I really want is to persuade them that certain things are bad because they cause pain to other living conscious things, and so we should not do them. So here's the deal, is that I feel like this does not in any way change, how pro-life I am. It doesn't change anything, but what it does mean is that I've realized it's a waste of time to get into politics, just like religion's a waste of time, And so, I don't really want to debate people on these things. I don't want to fight with them. I just record videos, and I record podcasts with my co-host, the Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast, and, and it's like, I just really want people to get a few things. I'm really hoping that people start understanding a few things, particularly the equality of humans and other animals, that we're all just animals, and that nobody's better than anyone, like nobody's life is more valuable. It's kind of a weird thing because, I hate violence of all types, and I really would like to see the whole world go vegan. Seriously. Those are the people that say, well, it's never going to happen. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it never will happen, but I still like it to happen. And the fact that I want that to happen is never going to change, even if the thing that I want doesn't actually happen. So recently, I've just been thinking about things and thinking about how can I be happy even though there will always be some level of suffering in the world? How can I be happy and focus on positive things and not get into fights with people about stuff? Because I want to help people become more logical and do less harmful things, but I want to do it in a way that doesn't involve anything nasty. I don't want to fight with people. I don't want there to be name-calling and fighting with people. And, the way the abortion debate is handled is so mean-spirited. People are hating each other so bad. And I don't really want to be part of a hateful debate about that or about the carnivore versus the vegan thing. I really don't want it to be a hateful fight. I just don't want that, And so it's a little bit difficult. You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to figure out if I should say something, when I should say something, and to who I should say something. So that's my thoughts on the matter. It started out as, kind of why I'm anti-theist, but I kind of got off on several other subjects because you know what? These are all related, and the reasons that I'm against religion are the same reasons that I'm against sex, and I'm against people slaughtering animals in factory farms, which always happens for meat, dairy, and egg products. There's just no way around it. So all the subjects are related. It's not like you can just take one part of my philosophy, the way I think, and then separate from all the others. Because if you separate, it doesn't work. These things all fit together, the way I look at it. So hopefully this will clarify some misunderstandings about